the delivery degree programs right there. So this is, I have a few, sorry, let me pass. Hold on. Okay, some of the labels are not going to show up because of the screen, but anyway, this is the Leadership International. A few data for you to have an overview. The Masters in Leadership in Brazil started in 2010 with 45 participants. It is a partnership with Brazil Adventist University right there. And the major success of the program is because we have a team of 8 to 10 local faculty members who are the program advisors. So they take care of all the advising. Some of them are graduated from, have a PhD from Andrews, and some others don't, but we have trained all of them on how to advise on the leadership program. I mean, for them to learn about portfolio, LLP, LLG, and so on. Okay? I mean, learning groups and learning plan. The audience of the Brazil cohorts are church leaders from all levels, division, unions, conference, and institutions in South America division, mostly in Brazil. A couple of people have come from other countries, but mostly from Brazil. We have had four cohorts who have already graduated, and 50, not 50. I'm talking about the 5th cohort started in January 2020, okay? So one day we'll get 50 cohorts, okay? So just wait, we're gonna get that. And this year, 2020, we started the first doctoral cohort in Brazil with the DLEAD, the Doctor of Leadership program, in January of 2020. I'll give you an overview in pictures so you can have an idea of who they are. Here are the graduates. This is the graduates of the first cohort, okay? Started in 2010, then they graduated in 2012. Okay, so actually those are participants and faculty members. Here are the graduates of the second cohort. They started in 2012. This is not graduation. This is what, just to let you know, for those who don't know, they have 4 sessions at the Brazil Adventist University in Brazil, and 1 session, all of them come here along with the local faculty, and we have 1 session at Andrews. So this was a picture of the second cohort just in front of Pioneer Memorial Church. This is the third cohort, who started in 2014. Okay, you can see some of our faculty right there. So that are the participants and the faculty members. And this is the 4th cohort of graduates, the graduates of the 4th cohort in 2017, again with the faculty and the participants. So we had like a symbolic ceremony, graduation ceremony right there. So those are the 4 cohorts. And this is cohort number 5 that we just started this year in January of 2020. So it's the brand new cohort of master's students in Brazil, and they were interrupted by the coronavirus break, to say it in a nice way. You know? So they stopped. We're going to continue next January. And I just want to show you one picture of our round table. We also have the round table once a year. We have the round table with flags from all over the world, I mean, all over the country, representing their conference, the place that they come from. And then now we have the first cohort of the doctoral program, Doctor of Leadership program. So here are the participants. They are leaders from all over the country, and we are our faculty. Eric, after 10 years of help in the Brazil cohort, can you share your experience in a few seconds? For as long as board permits you to speak. Yeah.
Yes, because
no, it's not possible to share it in 10 seconds. Only to tell you The specialness about Brazil is that it is sponsored by the Seventh-day Adventist Church, which means everybody that is in the program, most everybody that is in the program is a church leader. And I have never been in a more densely packed room with church leaders that are also our students, union presidents, conference presidents, and their teams, and so on. As a matter of fact, I still remember the first cohort was so enthusiastic that they took the leadership program and created a new program for leadership for pastors. And they modeled it after the leadership program, was kind of an imitation, but then they took subjects for pastors, and hundreds of people have graduated from that program as well, that they ran on their own. So it shows you that in that field that is growing relatively fast, it's really a very dynamic program. And we were very, very happy that we are now in our 5th cohort and with some doctoral students. I mean, it's a privilege to be there. I like Brazilians. They're people of energy. And when they start something, they really get into it. And it's fun to be part of it and to start asking questions about what they're doing and to shed light not only into their good practices, but also challenge them to rise up to the occasion, to take a look at some of the things that they're struggling with. And the Brazilians have been very good in coming along with us. And thank you, Robson, for the privilege of working with you for 10 years.
Thank you, Dr.
Very good.
It has been a great experience.
Because
Just
of time,
closing,
we won't be able to go too long.
yes,
but
just closing. Yeah, oh,
it's an excellent report. It's very encouraging to see that the Andrews University is not only working here on campus, but also in other countries. In fact, Robson, if you stop sharing, maybe Eric could tell us a little bit about Newbold as well. We have 4 minutes for that.
But just one final comment, because we didn't have the session this year because of the coronavirus, we are having monthly meetings with all the participants, and it's working very well. So we are hoping to resume in January. Yes, thank you for the opportunity. I'm going to stop sharing my screen right now. Yep.
Thank you so much, Dr. Merino.
Yes.
Well, the European program started in 2000. And one thing that is interesting about this program is that guess who was the principal? That's how they call their president at Newbold during that time. And I can see she is among us, Dr. Luxton, and she has a smile on her face because she's the one who was guiding that institution. And what an interesting journey it has been for her, because now she's the president of Andrews University. The Masters in Leadership is in Europe was started originally because there was a huge need after communism broke down to give a leadership education to those who never had the privilege of really formal education, because during communism that was not allowed. And so we had 2 cohorts at that time. Then we had over 10 years where we did not have a cohort. But in 2016, the Europeans came again and said, we have a different challenge now. Some of our fields struggle with the fact that we are very secular countries and so on. And how do you lead in a context like that, where the context is very challenging? And so that's the group 2006 that we had in 2016. We had another one that joined in 2017. And it was tailor-made for Europe. You can see some of the modules that we were teaching there. I enjoyed especially one that we called social workshop in social entrepreneuring. And we also had a seminar in innovation and creativity. We're part of the course. We had only 7 sessions, but the 8th session was an innovation seminar that we did for the community, and it was quite an interesting one because it was the students who taught it. We have learning groups. You notice one of the groups was called the Samaritans. And it's always, the fantastic thing about the European program was that we had practically from every nation in Europe, we had 1 or 2, or from England, maybe half a dozen participants. So it was very much an international cohort. And you learn a lot about yourself when you interact with other people, when they stretch you beyond your typical biases and what you take for granted. Here's a depiction of our competencies. You notice we have 7 core competencies, but then we had all kinds of optional competencies from which participants could choose. A great experience. It was a privilege. We had research projects like in every other master's program. And one thing that always impresses me is the way people change their leadership mindset while in the leadership program. And it's not so much what we teach as how we teach it to them, namely through the competencies. Everything that you learn, you have to apply, and then you start reflecting on what actually happened. And in that process, something happens to people, and it's a good thing. I better stop here.
Very good. Thank you so much, Dr. Baumgartner. We are very proud of what God has done for us in Brazil and in Europe, preparing leaders to be stronger leaders, to lead in these territories. And about after the webinar, Dr. Baumgartner will tell us a little bit about the journal that we have, the Journal of Applied Christian Leadership.
Sure.
But because we run out of time, we will have that right after our webinar around 8 o'clock. But for the moment, I would like to welcome the Dean of the School of Education and International Services, Dr. Arlene Thorpe, and she will be the one who introduces our guest this evening. Thank you, Dr. Thorpe. You have the floor.
Thank you, Dr. Saturday. It's wonderful to be here. It's been wonderful to be here all of the past weeks since we've started this webinar on leading in times of crisis. And it's actually been fascinating. I think we've just had one wonderful session after another. But today, I have a tremendous pleasure to introduce 2 very distinguished women who are not just distinguished women and leaders in the Seventh-day Adventist Church, but it is a pleasure for me because I am happy to say that both of them, I feel honored to say that I claim both of them as friends. And that's saying quite a bit. They share a number of things. One of the things that they share is that they represent firsts in a number of things. Dr. Andrea Luxton is the first woman to serve as the president of Andrews University. And as a result of that, because Andrews University is where the Seventh-day Adventist Theological Seminary is placed, she serves as the primary executive officer involved in the seminary. And this is quite a big thing. Dr. Ella Simmons has a double first, because not only was she the first General Vice President of the General Conference of Seventh-day Adventists, but she was the first Black woman elected as a General Vice President for the Seventh-day Adventist Church. And as she likes to remind us, these things need to be looked at separately because both are equally important and very momentous. I remember I was there at the General Conference session 15 years ago when this happened. And it made a huge difference in both women in the church, but also in African-American experience in the church. So one of the things I've also noticed is that these 2 women share, I think between the 2 of them, have served as top officials in at least 5 institutions, Seventh-day Adventist institutions, and served on countless boards. And I'm really happy to tell you that Dr. Simmons was actually my board chair for quite a while and really provided a lot of good leadership to distance education in the Seventh-day Adventist Church. But the most important thing you should know about both Dr. Luxton and Dr. Simmons is their firm commitment to Adventist education. And I will say at all levels, because both of them have K-12 experience as well as higher education experience. We're very lucky because under their leadership, the church has moved in very positive ways. And we're going to hear more of that from them today. Let's start with a word of prayer. And then I'm going to just turn it over, Dr. Saturday, to you again and to your team. Please, let's bow our head. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you so much for this chance that we have to be here with you tonight, to listen to 2 of the leaders of our church who will share their ideas and the way you have blessed them and made it possible for them to use their talents in service to you. We ask that you be with all of us who are listening tonight, that we receive a blessing, and we ask these things in Jesus' name. Amen. Dr. Saturday, I think you're muted.
Unmute. All right. I hope you can hear me now. Yes. All right. We'd like to welcome again Dr. Luxton, our president, and also Dr. Ella Simmons, the General Vice President of the General Conference. Thank you so much for taking time to be with us this evening. We know that your schedule is extremely busy, so we really appreciate your time and your expertise. It's very interesting that for the 6th and last webinar in the series, we have 2 ladies. And we know that they have something special they are going to share with us this evening. Dr. Luxton, I would like to start with you this evening. And I'm going to have my colleague, Dr. Gregoruti, to help me ask the questions. I would like to ask you, as you are the first female president of Andrews University, and you have been in office since 2016, how your experience has been in that position? And do you think that Andrews University was ready for a female president?
My experience has been very good, very positive, mainly because I have such an excellent team of professionals that I work with. And that has been extremely encouraging to me, and that they've supported me. We've had some challenging times, not least the current environment. And yet I just feel that I have been supported and helped through all of that by many good people. You know, I would say too that was Andrews ready for a female president? I think yes, probably yes. I'm not sure about every single person. You know, these individual kind of comments and things come up sometimes, and you think, well, maybe that was a little bit tough on this particular person. But generally speaking, yes. And I think education institutions in general are more open to women in leadership. This is my 3rd time of leading a higher education institution. And I would say that I've noticed a change over the years in how people see women in leadership in higher education or in education in general. Maybe just a slight anecdote. When my actual first leadership position was a principal of a K-12 school in England. And I remember one day my secretary putting through a parent to me who wanted to speak about maybe enrolling his son. And I picked up the phone and he said to me, hello. I said, hello, can I help you? And the phone went a little bit quiet and he said, but I want to speak to Dr. Luxton. And I said, yes, that's me. And he said very blatantly, but you can't be, you're a woman. and that's how blatant it was. But things have changed and shifted, and I have felt a huge degree of support.
Thank you. Dr. Gregority?
Yeah, I muted myself. Yeah, very interesting. Just a follow-up question for you related to this topic, which is very important. Based on your personal experiences, what would you say to younger women who aspire to executive positions down the road in their career? You know, they look at this idea of being a leader, a major leader. There is a very interesting, maybe you saw that saying on the mall in Washington, D.C., this being a president is like riding a tiger, you know. It's any time, you know, it can switch and eat you, you know. So what would you say?
You know, I one of the things that has really been important to me is something I believe I was shown very early on, even by my parents, which was God has given you talents, and those talents are for you to use to the maximum of your ability. And if a woman or a young man sees themselves with capacity for leadership, then they should use that capacity, because that's a skill and a capacity that God has given them. And they should move forward with that in mind. Now, of course, we don't make ourselves into leaders. A lot of other things happen. And I think it's about opening the doors, being willing to use all the skills you have, and putting yourself in a position where you can accept leadership, and, you know, try it out. Take opportunities to lead in this way or that way. Decide how, let other people see what you can do, and find out yourself what you can do.
Right. Yeah.
Thank you. Dr. Simmons, in 2005, it was a big splash because first woman and first Black person in that position, first Black female in that position, first female, let me say it right. So it has been 15 years now. Tell us, how was it then and how is it now?
Thank you so much. I really appreciate the invitation to be with you this evening. This is really where I feel I should be. But for the past 15 years, yes, I've been serving the World Church, and I'll try to put this in a capsule or two. I had thought about this, but as I'm sitting here, I thought about the day that it happened. At that moment, I was sitting in the auditorium as a member of the executive committee. And by then I knew that my name would come up, but it never occurred to me that I would be voted into office. I just knew that the Lord was using me to begin the conversations. And so my husband and I had thought horrible things would be said. My husband would not come to the auditorium with me. A good friend sat with me. And I sat there thinking, just let it roll off. I will not take this personally. God is using me to move us to the next level of consciousness. But it was a surprise. I was elected. And then we wondered what it would be like, especially overseas, because we hear all of these things about the overseas divisions, particularly Africa and Asia and South America, that they will not accept women in leadership roles. I want to tell you, I have been accepted worldwide, received so very well. And my division level colleagues, those in church leadership all over the world, have just been marvelous. But I must say, we still live in the world, and the church still reflects the world in many places, in many ways. And so, yes, I have experienced slights, experienced some negative responses and so forth, because I'm a woman, in many, many places, and because I am Black or an African American, and many other places. But I emphasize that this has not been the rule. But I want to say something that might surprise you. I have experienced the greatest rejection in the United States. And that was a total surprise to me. And I'll give you one example that seems to be a little thing, because sometimes, you know, this aggression is passive and sometimes it's more direct and more open. But once, many years ago, I was interviewed by an Adventist TV station, one of our divisions, in a positive setting, much like here we are tonight. And in this interview, I made what I thought was a very positive statement, and I really made it innocently. And I applauded our world church for the way it had learned, as Dr. Luxton said, over time to support women in ministry and leadership. And I thought nothing more about that. I was very pleased with being able to make that statement of progress. Well, shortly after I returned to the States, a group of men and women from the US attacked me for all kinds of things they thought they heard in that interview. And for example, I was accused of promoting women's ordination. Now, let me tell you, ordination never came up in that conversation. In fact, the host and I had agreed that we would not address that topic, that there was too much positive to talk about to even deal with that on that occasion. But these people somehow felt that my agenda was to promote women's ordination, and they attacked me on everything. One point being something they would never have said to a man. They said that I had the audacity to have as a backdrop the General Conference or World Church logo. Well, that's an interesting statement because obviously that was tradition or is tradition. It is the appropriate backdrop for an official of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. But perhaps like that young man who said to Dr. Luxton, but you're a woman, maybe they just couldn't see me with that backdrop. It just did not work for them. And that's what I've gotten in the US. But overseas, I am, and let me be careful. I am from the US. This is my home, and I have been supported very well here also. But I was surprised by the level of rejection here. Overseas, overall, has just been marvelous. And at first, I thought I was invited to speak and to minister and to serve sort of as a courtesy to the president of the General Conference. But almost immediately, it became clear that the leaders in these various world divisions really did appreciate my contributions because the invitations came so often that I could barely keep up. I could not accept them all, and they were never required to invite me.
Thank you. Dr. Gogoluti?
Yeah, we're gonna pick on Dr. Luxton again. So you see, so this is a very hard question. It's about social justice. You know, as you see, it's very touchy and very difficult to handle. How do you see that in terms of your personal vision for Andrews and this context of important movements, social movements to reform? How would you picture that?
We are an educational institution, and of course our primary role, we say here right now, world changes made here, or world changes now for a changing world, and that is what we are really about. But as soon as we make that claim that we're educating people to make a difference in the world, we can't separate that from the needs of the world and the issues of the world. Otherwise, we're living in a vacuum, and education really can't effectively exist in a vacuum. It's got to connect to the world, and it's got to enable people to move out into the world and do something positive. You know, to me, there are so many places in the Bible, from the Old Testament through the New Testament, where God speaking through his prophets or Jesus speaking himself makes it clear that while we are concerned with the kingdom to come, we must also be concerned with the kingdom that is present here. And that involves the way we treat people, the way we respond to issues around us. And so I feel that as an educational institution, particularly one that represents the world and speaks to the world, we need to have a voice, and we need to encourage our students to look at these critical issues and respond to them in a constructive and positive way. But that doesn't mean we're going to be right out there in the front, raging and that's not what I'm talking about here. But I'm talking about a thoughtful, measured engagement with what is happening in our world, and particularly where we see something that's wrong. We need to be able to call it out. We need our students and our community to be able to call that out, again, in a thoughtful, compassionate, but clear way.
Good. Interesting. That actually, let me just follow up. It's very difficult because there are many emotions into this, but we have to kind of, what you're saying is actually reform the thinking, the way they think about these issues, right?
Yeah, and this is maybe coming from outside North America. One of the surprising things I have found about living in the United States is how much social issues and political affinities seem to combine in people's minds. And to me, we shouldn't be driven in the way we act towards each other by our politics. We should be driven by the Bible, and we should be driven by the gospel. That should be where we come in. And so to me, when we talk about social issues, to me, it's not, is this a Republican ideal or is this a Democratic ideal? It should be, is this a biblical approach? What does the Bible say about the way we should respond to people and the way we should do things? And that's where we should be responding from.
Okay.
Thank you. Dr. Simmons, a question for you. In the context of Black Lives and the Black Lives Matter movement, how Christian universities could contribute to foster fairness, understanding, and cooperation between various ethnic groups, and how educational leaders can be part of the solution, not part of the problem.
Mm-hmm. Well, first, I would agree with what Dr. Luxton has said, and I would probably focus on educational leaders. And for our context, looking at those of us in the church in leadership as well as in the various institutions. And so first, I would say we must acknowledge racial discrimination, that it is real in the world, and we're sorry to say it is real in the church. For some reason, we don't like to acknowledge that fact. And that surprises me because as Seventh-day Adventists, we well know, as with any sin, we cannot address it to repent from it if we don't acknowledge that it is sin. And I would say, and I think you've heard this, and I just have to be honest about this, but I hear some speak of addressing racial issues or social issues, or speak of social justice as being something deviant. And it is as though this has been flipped. I don't understand how they see addressing social issues as a deviation from the mission of the church, particularly racial issues. For the life of me, I cannot understand that way of thinking. Jesus made it clear, and before and after Jesus' earthly sojourn, biblical writers admonished us that we have to demonstrate godly love toward each other and those beyond our own borders as well. Jesus said that those to whom, and I'm using my words, of course, Jesus said the they being those to whom we go to take the gospel message, will know that we are his, that is, that our message is genuine by our love. We have to value, advocate for, and live out godly justice if we are his. This world has a long and infamous history. And I have to say, the church didn't start that way, but fell over into that history of using scripture to justify oppression, bigotry, hatred, and the like, as they are fueled or at least manifested in racism, classism, and I'll say casteism, sexism, tribalism, and so forth. The church and our institutions, and I hold the church responsible first, but our institutions must take courage and at once be humble within themselves to be models of Christian love to a lost world. Our universities, from my perspective, should be first among equals in demonstrating Christ-like love and spiritual maturity. Life on campus must say to every student that you are valuable, you are God's son, you are God's daughter. We reject what is happening over there, wherever over there is. That could be in the world outside the church or across the street at a conference office or wherever. We must stand up and reject the sin of oppression and hatred and bigotry wherever we see it. And the universities are in a position, I believe, to lead the church if the church will not step up in its right, responsible place.
Thank you. Dr. Gigoroti?
Yeah, Dr. Luxton, switching a little bit of the topics here. We're in the middle of this coronavirus or crisis, and you had a meeting with Governor, Michigan Governor Whitmer, and I imagine that was very difficult for you and for the administration to make a decision, about this crisis. How do you handle? I mean, you have a lot of cost here, buildings. If you send people home, what do you do with all this cost and everything? It's so difficult. How would you describe all this process? Because you've been walking through this difficult. I'm sure you were not ready for this, nor were even thinking about this stuff, and you have to face it.
It's actually very interesting. Talking to some of my colleagues who are presidents elsewhere, we comment on the fact that in the current environment, we're making a week's decision in a day. Back in March, when this decision was first made to close the campus, we were actually making a month's decision in a day. Everything was moving that fast and that quickly. In actual fact, the timeline was that we on the campus, we had already made the decision to close before we had the meeting with the governor. And so that actually helped in our acceptance of her position as well, because we had just watching what was happening around, we realized that we were not in a situation right then to try and keep people safe. And we felt that absolutely had to be the first thing on our mind. The second thing, of course, was to make sure people could continue their education. And those have been the two driving features all the time. And yes, it's inconvenient. Yes, it's financially challenging. Yes, it's caused a lot of difficulties to us. But at the time, you have to say, what is the right thing to do at this point in time for this community? And first of all, we needed to make that decision in order to put ourselves in a place where we could make further decisions to continue everyone's education properly and so on and move forward. That's kind of what happened, but everything happened so very, very quickly. So within a couple of days, we moved from virtually no challenges to closing the campus to everyone moving home. And then everything has moved on from there.
How do you picture the future?
Well, I think we've had to keep our focus in exactly the same way. Number one, how do we maintain our responsibility to try and keep our community safe? And secondly, how do we make sure within that context we can keep everyone's education going as strongly as possible. So now we have made a decision that we will open. Difference now being, we've been able to put in place protocols and processes to enable a greater level of safety, which we could not have done in March. We could not have moved to that level of protocols in a very quick time. It's taken months to do that. So that's the way we're going. We're moving that way with faith and with hope that is going to work. If things change, will we have to go back? It's possible. We hope not, but it is possible. But we have to be driven by the same principles again. And in this kind of situation, financial concerns cannot go above the individual needs of the community. It can't. You put it up there, then you're going to make bad mistakes, I think.
Thank you.
Dr. Luxton, what was your reaction when they came to you and say, you know what, the singer Sandy Patty, who had the concert on March 8 on your campus, she was infected when she was performing that. What was the reaction when you heard that for the first time?
Oh no, that was exactly the reaction. Because obviously at the time of the concert, there was no real concern. There were no cases in Michigan at the time of the concert. Concerts were going on everywhere. We moved forward in good faith. It was very challenging. And but again, we got straight onto the contact with the health department and also with our medical facilities, and we got into action really, really quickly. They were amazingly supportive. And so we were able to do what they call contact tracing extremely quickly. 3 people that we know of ended up positive from that situation. But it was we were able to get on top of it very quickly. And there was no real further spread beyond that because I think of the speed of reactions and the support of everyone coming together to make things work. And really that comes back to something I said very early on. You have to, having the right team, having people who will work together, who will be responsive, who are looking out for the community and not themselves. That's what enables you to make decisions and for those decisions to work.
This crisis has an emotional toll, right? Very difficult. The morale of the professors and people on campus, you have to really, you've been announcing this, literally fire some people or furlough some, And so how do you cope with this tension? You have to be safe and on one side, keep the budget, and at the same time not, lose the morale, the people who are actually the gears of the system that we have as a university.
I think leadership is almost a lot of the time. Leadership is requiring you to find the right balance between two things that pull you in different directions. It's a kind of old justice and mercy, which is most important. Both are important, and both have to be at the highest points of your consideration. And in situations like that, it's the same thing. Yes, we have to keep the community safe. Yes, we have to deal with the morale of employees and be there for our employees. And both of those have to be held in tension constantly. Once you left one rule completely and ignore the other, then I think you get into problems. And that's a philosophical response rather than a practical response. I think that underlies the decisions you then make. You've got to keep both things there in your mind all the time. It's what I call the 10-10 principle. What matters most, productivity or people? Well, they both matter, and they both matter 10-10, not 5-5. You can't have a compromise, but it always is going to be then a tension. And, do you make the right decision all the time? No, no, you don't. But by trying to maintain both of those as vitally important, it means you don't make any decision lightly. And I think as soon as you don't make any decision lightly, you are more likely to come up with something that is right, even though, you know, it is going to impact people.
Right. And people tend to, you know, I think what I felt here on campus is people engage into this idea of shutting down and switching and doing this. I felt from the professor side, a lot of interest in contributed to the same.
Oh, absolutely. The campus was amazing. I mean, I've talked about my leadership team, but let me talk about my colleagues on the campus. Amazing, really. I can count on one hand, literally, the number of negative comments, really, that have come back over this whole period of time where everyone has been under stress. Everyone has had some loss involved in what's going on. And just that pulling together of people. And I think that comes with the sense that everyone, in a sense, has that same vision of what they're wanting for their students, what they're wanting for the university. And that has been phenomenal. That has been amazing to see.
That's good. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Simmons, part of your responsibilities is to serve as the chair of some of our institutions. And we know that our graduate school in the Philippines just went through a very difficult time, a crisis, really, just recently. Could you just tell us what happened and what was the response of the leadership, and what do you think, please?
Thank you. Actually, two things, because they experienced COVID-19 pandemic with the rest of the world. But I think I should focus on the January 12th, 2020 eruption of the volcano Taal. This is a well-known volcano in Philippines. It rumbles a lot. It smokes a little here and there, but usually that's it. But leading up to January 12th, it acted a little different. And finally, about 4:30 in the afternoon, Philippine time, January 12th, it blew. This volcano is located, or maybe I should say, since it was there first, our campus is located just about 22 kilometers or 13 miles distance. The way they have the, how shall I say, the danger zone set up, they're in concentric circles. And we were like we are located in that second circle, that second level, just outside the run now, the evacuate immediate zone. And so that made it even more difficult, I think, for the decisions for our institution, because in that first zone, there was no question, you just have to get out. Beyond that, perhaps it was safe and you did not have to move. We were in that area that could go either way. Yes, I chair the board, and I worked very closely with our president, Weller. And maybe I can kind of focus on the high points of how we handled that, how we approached it. And I won't go so much into how we felt, that's already been described. But first and foremost, I will say that Dr. Ketting Weller had been on campus as president for less than a year. I think that is significant and very interesting. We had just held her installation services in November, and we were all feeling very good about many things. And then this happened. So beginning January, and then of course coming February, what happened? First and foremost though, Dr. Ketting Weller and I sought to keep the mission of IAS, the Adventist International Institute of Advanced Studies, before us all times and before those on the campus. Also, we wanted to remind those at the General Conference and in other areas, the divisions particularly. We had to remember what our values are and rehearse them frequently. And it was during this time, it was somewhat of a coincidence that the 10 days of prayer program was to be held on campus. And we had a speaker there who made a courageous decision to stay with the campus. It came down to those week in a day or month in a day decisions. And when it came to the volcano, the decisions were made moment by moment. Ash was flying, dust and smoke were everywhere. People were stranded on the highways and leaving. Dr. Ketting Weller had to make a decision with her team whether to get her people out onto the highways ahead of everyone, or to wait to see, or to get them trapped, which was a possibility. And she and I spoke quite often. You know, the time factor is 12 hours difference. So there were times when I stayed up all night with her, and there were times when she was up all night with me practically. But the main thing was that we kept the 10 days of prayer alive, the week of prayer, and we were blessed. Dr. Ketting Weller produced positive messages constantly during this time for the campus. She gave them the truth with real announcements, keeping them updated on the danger factors and so forth, but she always kept them positive. And then my job as board chair was to try to buoy her up a bit, to encourage her, to be her sounding board, and to assure her that she would make the right decision as we prayed and asked God's guidance. We prioritize the health and safety of our people first and foremost, beyond the spiritual reminders and putting ourselves in God's hands. That's just a dangerous situation to breathe volcanic air. And so there had to be decisions about whether to stay or go, but also what to do if we stay. And so we talked these things over. Dr. Ketting Weller got the information that was needed, and they immediately put into action all of the safety factors. My job again was to continue governing, not to get into administration, but to know to be flexible and to be adaptable, or to be able to adapt as we move through. I wanted to be a key partner with Dr. Ketting Weller, to be her colleague. That was important. And again, as I said, to provide a listening ear, to be that person behind the scenes. I felt, especially since she was a new president, that it was important for me to work behind the scenes and for her to be the strong, confident president out front. That was important. I wanted to do nothing to undermine her leadership and her presidency, but we were able to work closely together. I would say another major factor was that we decided to over communicate. She had to communicate with those on campus, with those who had been called home. Some of the nations called their folks home. Some divisions called their people home. So many left campus. So while she was dealing with this volcano and all that was going on with that, in the back of her mind, she was thinking about the financial implications of individuals leaving the campus in droves. But we decided we have to communicate. So communication was important with those on the campus, with the board through me, and with specific individuals who had certain expertise that might be needed at a given time, such as the chair of our finance committee and so forth. She had to communicate with general conference leaders, with division leaders in 2 divisions, also with potential students who were in the pipeline to come to campus, and then Adventist risk management, of course. And then there were all the layers of national entities to which she had to, with whom she had to communicate. I would say that flexibility and adaptability were 2 of our major strengths, but also provided for us some learning opportunities. We needed to be able to, if there were any way to do this, to anticipate what each day would bring, or at least to put in place the possibilities to be able to respond. But beyond that, I think I tried to practice what a good board chairperson would do, was to let her focus on the day-to-day problems that were right in her face, while I tried to maintain equilibrium of thought, and direction and communication, looking at the externals, even beyond the external health and safety issues, but the externals in higher education, international higher education, in the worldwide church, and also to keep an eye on the future, always looking to the future, as she was able to focus most keenly on what was happening right there in front of her. And I will say this last thing, of course, that through much prayer, acknowledgement of God's role and relying on God for everything, of course, we were friends together, we were colleagues together in this, we were sisters in the struggle. And she also had wonderful support from her campus family, the faculty and staff and students who remained. They did all sorts of things. We don't have time to go into all of the details, but she was able to bring them in. And I encouraged her to broaden her team, to bring in others. And she found that helpful. And I suppose one takeaway is that we tried to look at what was happening as it was happening, to reflect as we could as we were going along, and then coming out of some of the trigger points to reflect, so that we could use all that we experienced as learning opportunities for going forward. And we had to acknowledge that life will never be the same. First, with the volcano, we thought we had a chance to return to what we knew was normal, but then when the pandemic hit, we know now that things will be different, but we will find a way as God leads.
Very good. Thank you so much. I see that we have a lot of questions. Maybe we have, I'm going to ask Dr. Ledesma to please pick up a couple of questions for us from the audience, because many people are asking questions right and left. Dr. Ledesma, could you please guide us in a couple of questions from the audience, please?
I would absolutely be happy to do so. Dr. Luxton, how do you see Andrews University leading in distance education, not only for Seventh-day Adventists, but for the greater educational world?
You know, I actually think that even with COVID-19, we have come to understand how important it is to be flexible and how important it is for us to be able to move into other forms of delivery. And of course, distance education does that. And we are really privileged in a way that some years ago, just after I came here, in fact, Griggs University moved from the General Conference to Andrews University. And we had a lot of skills and capacities that came with us then. I still believe we have an outstanding team, and we really, I think, have the ability to show best practice to the world in this whole area. The good thing about distance education is it can be done from one place, where there can be leadership in one place, but it can really involve multiple people in a very collegial way. And I think that is the way that we can help impact the world, not by doing everything ourselves, but by building connections that can reach out and help other people.
Thank you, Dr. Luxton. Dr. Simmons, this is another participant question. I have visited the United States a few times and was struck by the divisions in the church in terms of Black and white conferences. I wonder how you have managed to navigate that by being a vice president. Do you have an affinity to any of these congregations? What is the General Conference's position, and is there any work towards greater unification? So those are multiple questions. Please feel free to answer them.
That's right. There's several.
That's another hour.
Another hour. I'm trying to put it together.
Dr. Satune told me to. Dr. Satune asked me to ask the ones that I thought were more pressing, so I'm trying.
Yes. Well, let me say this. I was born and raised in the United States, so I've always had to be multicultural, multilingual, speaking English, if you understand, multicultural in my affinities, in order to work with people from different backgrounds. in regard to the Black and White conferences, the regional conferences, that goes back in our history. You are aware that actually this country belonged to the groups of people we refer to as Native Americans right now. One of those groups is part of my family background, the Cherokees. This country was taken, and and of course there are different perspectives on how we look at that. But at a given point, Africans were brought here to the U.S. as slaves. And after many years in slavery, Africans remained here. And we didn't all pick up and go back to the various places in Africa where we think we are from, because not all were traceable. But we chose, and sometimes when we think of the name African American, it's strange to most people in most countries. And I've had people ask me, what are you, who are you? And without thinking, I just say African American. So they say, what do you mean, African or American? And I've come to realize that that is difficult for people to understand, but we have to be able to live in these two worlds. And I will say within the church, the divisions came after our church had been valiant proponents of the abolition of slavery, after our church leaders, our foreparents, fought and operated underground railroads, we call them, or passages for rescuing people out of slavery. After we had done all of those right things for the righteousness of God's social justice, we fell into, as a church body, fell into a pattern of following the popular society, the United States. And there was bigotry, oppression that continued after slavery, and it was institutionalized and systematized and continues to this day, even in the church. We've made great strides, but we're not nearly where we should be. And the regional conferences came out of a time when African Americans, Black people in the US, felt that they just could not overcome the oppression in the church, and they could not rise in leadership, and just wanted to provide for other Black people. Now, I would say I wish there had never been a need for regional conferences or the Black conferences. I wish we could be unified, but until we as a church family, as a body, acknowledge the racism in this country that has infiltrated, whatever you want to say, into the Seventh-day Adventist Church, and that is nurtured by some in the church, some intentionally, I think most unintentionally, but until we recognize that and decide to eradicate racism and all forms of oppression from among our ranks, we will never be unified, no matter what programs we have coming out of the General Conference, no matter how much those of us who believe strive to make it happen. It will never happen until the church, the worldwide church, acknowledges and changes its ways. Then God will bless us and we will be unified.
Thank you so much, Dr. Simmons. This next question is for both Dr. Luxton and Dr. Simmons. How, as an organization, how would we be able to ensure sustainable financing and stable cash reserves? Are there well-coordinated and standardized communication systems and protocol that ensure clear and transparent communication with all stakeholders in times of crises?
I will speak quickly so that Dr. Luxton can explain. And the answer is yes. We do have systems in place to provide these kinds of services and information, the transparency that we need and that we should provide to the world church. Their decisions about who will give what information to whom at what points in time. But these are in place in the church. And of course, we can always do better. We can always learn more and learn how to do better. And you do know that what we familiarly referred to as GCAS, the General Conference Auditing System. That is a system that is alive and well worldwide. And we as a people have to give teeth to that. And some have pressed to be sure that others follow and are held accountable. And I know that Dr. Luxton would prefer more to speak about institutions, so I did not touch that.
I would agree. I think the church is pretty good and very solid in having guidelines as to how things should be. Whether it is the local church, a conference, a union, the general conference, or an institution, that is there. The guidance is very wise. It's prudent. It's not so conservative that you can't move an institution or an organization forward. But it is prudent, it is careful, because I think the church is very conscious of the fact that the money we work with, it's tithe. A lot of it is tithe, a lot of it is money from the members. It is God's money, so to speak. And so we'd better be responsible about the way we use it. I think that's all in place. Of course, the challenge comes when we are in crisis. What do you do? Or if you are in a part of the world, or you're in a conference, or you're in an area where just the money is not there, what do you do? And of course, there's always the risks then of taking shortcuts, or blurring the policies in order to make things work. Very often that happens for reasons, for understandable reasons. But I think the church, understandably and correctly, is really trying to focus on this and say, no, there's an integrity that must happen in the way we deal with money, and that is really a non-negotiable. If you find yourself in trouble, then yes, let's talk about how we can deal with that. And when I've been in institutions like the current environment, where we find ourselves, all of a sudden, millions of dollars of revenue just disappears. What do you do? And that's where your boards and people should be getting around you and saying, let's solve this together. And my experience has been largely very positive in having that kind of response from people. So, there's no easy answers to this one, but I do think we have the framework to act responsibly with finances.
Thank you.
May I add one point?
Yes, please.
Because you mentioned transparency, and I alluded to that, that the mechanisms are there for complete, thorough transparency.
Yes, absolutely.
But and with that, I do want to hasten to say that in some countries, under certain circumstances where we might be faced with war or other kinds of things, we have to be very careful about transparency about the church's assets, because there are those who would like to move in to take them over. So we have to exercise wisdom even there, as was said.
Thank you. This is for both of you. You have demonstrated great resilience and success in the midst of volcano crisis, in the midst of COVID-19 and Black Lives Matter. What has been your source of strength? What role, if any, has self-care impacted your leadership?
That's a great question. Let me try first. I'm going to just talk about two principles here that have become important to me. One I learned after I found in early years, where I just wanted to keep going because there was always so much to do, and I wanted to do it, that eventually you are unable to do what you want to do if you don't take care of yourself. You have to take care of yourself. And I think for me, that means I find these blocks of time and I block them out well in advance to make sure I have those moments in time where I can rejuvenate. I think that's critical. The second bit I want to talk about is the power of prayer and the power of finding those still moments with God. I have, in 2 or 3 crises that I have faced, I could identify a specific time when I just went by myself and I just sensed in the calm and quiet that I was able to find when I could hear God's voice quite clearly in the decision that was made. It wasn't a voice speaking to me, but when I looked at the way the ideas came together and the decision that was made, it was one of what I call those God moments. And that to me is critical. Give God the opportunity to be able to speak to you by quietening yourself enough to be able to hear that voice.
Thank you. The next question is another very poignant question. It says, I came across an article that asserted that 50% of educational institutions are at a risk of not surviving the impact of COVID-19. Do you think that there's a need for a revised mission and strategy, or are you just focusing more on the execution part, specifically having a robust enterprise risk management program, ERM, to protect current strategy?
Okay, well, I guess I'll start with that one too. So, you know, before COVID-19 came along, the forecasts were saying that 1/3 of all small colleges in America would close within the next 10 years. So this sense that something is imminent and going to bring change and you're not going to survive has been there. But what COVID-19 has done is it has accelerated that risk factor for institutions. No, absolutely, you can't just involve on risk mitigation and business as usual. There is no way that higher education, I think on any institution is going to be the same. I just do not believe that is possible. Too much has happened. And you know, the good side of what has happened to us is it has pushed people to think differently, think outside the box, do things in different ways, create new mechanisms to do things. If you like, in the positive way, it has forced innovative thinking and creative thinking. That is what is needed in higher education. You know, our mission does not change, but delivery of mission is optional. You can manage your mission this way or this way or this way. It doesn't have to be the same way it has been done for 50 years. And I think we have been forced into looking at those things, and there's many great ideas that have emerged. And I think the other thing that I've read is that the institutions that will survive are those that have learned how to be flexible and innovative and creative. And so absolutely, basically it's a requirement. It's a requirement for survival to not think we can go back to how it was before.
Right. I think in addition, for all Adventist educational institutions, the world church is going to have to begin to think differently about how we provide education at all levels. And as Dr. Luxton was saying, as I alluded to earlier, even with IAS and with other institutions, not only must we make the decision, do we need this institution? We ask them the question, and what kind of institution must it be going forward?
Thank you.
Good.
We have one
Thank
last
you.
question.
Maybe the last one, the last question.
Yes, and I think it's a great question to end on, Dr. Saturday. For both Dr. Luxton and Dr. Simmons, would you please share with us opportunities that you have experienced as a result of the present crisis, both in higher education and in our world church, opportunities that have come out of the crises you've experienced?
I will give you just 2 quick points. One, Dr. Luxton referred to self-care. I am very poor at that. I always try to care for everyone and everything else and feel a sense of responsibility and do not stop when I should. And I know better. This has forced me to stop traveling. And that has made a difference even in my health. And I connect to that the world church has come to understand better. Some of us tried to get the point across before, but the world church has come to understand better that we can do business, we can engage with each other without living half of our lives on airplanes, that we can use technology to do just what we're doing now. And we have held major meetings of hundreds of people over the past several months and have done quite well with continuing God's business using different modalities and methodologies.
Thank you, Dr. Simmons. Dr.
Um,
Luxton.
yeah, my response is pretty close to the same thing. You know, one of the things that I learned early on in my career is that when you want to get from A to B, you don't always have to go in a straight line. There are multiple ways of getting to A to B. But the fallback position is we tend to have this track that this is how you get there, and you keep going and doing that same thing the same way every time. And then all of a sudden, we discovered that we couldn't go from A to B in a straight line. We had to think outside the box. And I think that's one of the things I've learned. And I said to someone, the second thing I said to someone today, I've never remember in my life, well, certainly in my adult life, ever being in one place for so long. And it's actually been a blessing.
Thank you both. Dr. Saturday?
Yes, Dr. Luxton, I would like to ask you as we conclude to tell us what is your personal philosophy of leadership?
Oh, wow. Creating potential. I would say, if I want to put in 2 words, to me, it is about looking at my team, looking at, in this case, students, and looking at the possibilities and helping people reach their God-given potential, and being basically being a resource to enable that to happen.
Thank you.
Very simply.
Yes. Dr. Simmons, as we conclude, you have been in the academia, you have been VP for academic affairs, you have been traveling all over the world. I would like you to tell us briefly, if you were to say to all those leaders, some in training, some already in the front line, who are listening to us, if you want them to remember 2 things as we conclude, something they should never do as a leader and something they should always remember as leaders, what would you say?
I suppose well, it doesn't matter where I start with this as we move quickly. I would say leaders must be spiritual mature first and for all, and that embodies so much, but spiritual maturity is not an option for a leader. We leaders must be converted. We must be born again. That's the bottom line. We have to exercise spiritual intelligence, which includes emotional intelligence and many other requirements and other kinds of sensibilities. I would say first and foremost, and I would say perhaps that successful leaders, that is what your goal is, will demonstrate the highest in integrity in all areas of their personal lives and professional interactions. And I see integrity as being a step above ethics. You know, ethically, we follow all the rules, but I think with integrity, we do what is right because it is right, whether there is a rule or not, and even if it goes against a rule. And then I would say the nevers, maybe, never believe that any success you experience is of or from yourself. All victories, all successes, all good things come from God. And then perhaps, and I think of us as I say this, never confuse the means with the end. Don't allow processes to eclipse or to become the goal in any area of life, I would say ministry or service.
Thank you so much, Dr. Simmons. I think there was a lot of wisdom in what we heard today. Dr. Thorpe, if you're here, I would like to invite you to just say a word of thanks to our guests today, please, at this time.
Well, I certainly have. I haven't been able to leave. I wanted to listen to every word, and each word that came, what made me want to stay even more. I want to thank both Dr. Luxton and Dr. Simmons for sharing so generously of their time, and actually not just of their time, but of their experience. Now you know why they hold the positions they hold and how well they have been doing those things. We really greatly appreciate it. Thank you so much for spending time with us and for sharing. We have had more than 100 people on this webinar tonight. And all of the comments have been so incredibly positive. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Thor. As we transition, I would like to thank you again, to thank you, Dr. Simmons, Dr. Luxton, for your wonderful presentation this evening. And we have been blessed, and we know that the audience is very thankful for what they have heard today, and that will help us to be better and stronger leaders as we move forward in our responsibilities. I'm going to transition to think about what will happen soon, because some people have been saying, oh, this series is so wonderful. Why do you want to stop? Yes, today is the last one, the sixth webinar, but we have something else for you. And I'm going to ask Dr. Randy Siebel to please come forward and share with us what is going to happen very soon. In a couple of weeks, I'm going to put it on the screen here. Dr. Siebel, could you please tell us about this event that is coming soon on our campus?
Absolutely. I'm really excited about this. You know, when we got together in our leadership department, we have an orientation that's next week. And then we have a leadership roundtable, which is a group that gets together who are in the leadership program. And what we typically do each year is we have a convention, a conference where we bring a special speaker in and we make a day of it. Well, we decided this year to make it a little different because of our online presence. And what we decided to do was go into 2 evening programs and do 2 interviews. And continuing on the theme of women leaders, actually, we have 2 women who we've invited in who are really very impressive, each one in their own right. One very academic, one very practical, both with loads of experience. And I'm really excited that the topic really is going to be on leadership health. And this is the physical, talking about taking care of yourself. And I am completely sold out. I've had several conversations with Evelyn Kissinger, who is in the Michigan area. Those of you who have been in this area have been really blessed by her ministry, her talks, her loads of experience. And Denise Kirshner, a PhD over from University of Michigan. She has been studying things just like COVID and their exposure rates. So I think you're going to be very blessed. Dr. Kirshner is going to be interviewed on Monday evening. Evelyn Kissinger is going to follow her up with very practical ways of responding to this, both on a personal level as well as a level on how to be a blessing to those you lead. So thanks for a moment to share that, Dr. Stanek, today. I appreciate that.
Very good. Thank you very much, Dr. Siebel. And we promised to the audience that we are going to share a few words about the Journal of Applied Christian Leadership. But I think Dr. Baumgartner had a little technical problem. Maybe I'm going to ask Dr. Corwick to just say in 2 minutes a few words about our journal, the Journal of Applied Christian Leadership. I'm aware that I catch you off guard, but I think that you are going to be able to say a few words about that journal for us so that people can know what we do and what we publish and what this journal is about and how we would like our students and participants also to be ready to be part of this scholarly initiative.
The Journal of Applied Christian Leadership, JACL, has been around for 14 years, and the 14th edition is coming out soon. There's both conceptual articles as well as practical articles that are given out, and I've written for it, so I'm biased. I like the journal. One of my favorite articles I've ever published is in that journal. It's about the 4 types of moral leaders: the prophet, priest, king, and judge that every organization needs. But there's many articles in there from social science viewpoints, scriptural viewpoints, and we have also a series of book reviews. And those book reviews are themselves very valuable. And then we usually have some practical application also in each issue. So in fact, we encourage a lot of our doctoral students to publish for it and to write book reviews for it. So And you can find it online. Just type in Journal of Applied Christian Leadership, and you can get free downloads of the article. The most recent issues you have to have a subscription to, and we give subscriptions to all our students. That's one of the perks of being in our program. Plus, 1 year later, all the articles are made available to everybody in the church and outside the church. We get a lot of submissions every year from different Christian and Catholic and other organizations who want to write about Christian leadership. So very useful.
Donne-moi le téléphone, s'il te plaît.
Very good. Thank you very much, Dr. Cowick, for this information about Christian leadership. And now we have a few minutes, about 10 minutes to just comment about what our guests have said today, and also what the other guests have said the last 5 webinars. Every day I take notes when they speak, and today again I'm going to share my notes with you. It's very interesting to see how the various guests from Chaplain Valson and President Terry Shaw, from Dr. Kwan, and from the President of Columbia Union, Pastor Wigley. All of them, they have mentioned a few things, and we can connect all those things together as future leaders and our leaders in training. We can learn from those principles. First of all, we can see that the first thing is for the leader to be able to realize that there is a crisis. Because if you deny there is a problem, you are not going anywhere. In fact, I have a lot of illustration for that. I hope I have it right on hand here. I can share that to you. It's a story that can make you smile a little bit, but that was a true story. In December of last year, the Prime Minister of Australia, there was a big crisis in the country, and there were over 100 fires consuming homes and affecting people and so on. But Prime Minister Morrison has a problem. He had promised to his children that he's going to take them to Hawaii on vacation. And he felt that if he didn't keep that promise, there would be a crisis in the family. So what he did, as the country was facing that fire, it was on the news all over the world, he took the plane with his family and went on vacation in Hawaii. So you can imagine what happened in the public opinion, in the press. Everybody was talking, where is our Prime Minister? Our country is burning down. He's on vacation. And he had to come back, cut short his vacation. And he came back and apologized to the public, who was very angry because the leader was not able to realize that there was a crisis, and he needs to be there with the people to show that he understands that there is a problem. Although he could not do much about the fire, it was, the consequences of years of erosion, of bad decisions about this planet. But the people needed to see him there as a leader to lead and to help with the crisis. So first of all, we need to realize there's a crisis. Number two, we need to be there with the people. You heard Dr. Simmons, she mentioned several times this time, sometime at night, during the day, she was there with the president as board chair to give support. We heard also about balance. Sometimes there are very difficult choices to make when there's a crisis, and that's typical of every crisis. There is no really 100% good, quote unquote, solution. Whatever you do, there's a downside. It's a give and take. And you have to have the wisdom to make the choice, to make the decision, and you have to make the decision fast. There is no time. There's a crisis. You have to make a decision as a leader, and the people are waiting on you to do something, to say something. Not only you have to communicate, but you have to make choices very quickly. And as Dr. Luxton mentioned, sometimes the decisions are good, sometimes they are less good, because when you're making quick decisions, sometimes you make mistakes. And the people understand also. They know that as the crisis evolve, leaders have to make adjustment. They talk a lot about flexibility, about adjustment. And Dr. Luxton even mentioned that those who will survive are those who can be creative, who can adjust to the situation. And that's very important for us as leaders to remember that we cannot be rigid and be like the Pharisees, just go by the books, just go by the law, by the letter of the law, but understand that we need to remember our mission, why I am here as a leader. I'm leading this institution. What am I supposed to do? What are the most important things that I have to do? What are my values? What is my mission? And when I look at my values, at my principles, at my mission, then I make decision. And through it all, tonight again, we heard it from Terry Shaw, we heard it again. First of all, they are talking what is safe for the people I'm leading. Safety of my employees, safety of my students, safety of the people that I am leading. And we heard also, they talk also about humility. We recognize it that sometimes we don't know everything. Sometimes we don't make the right decision. And if we don't, it's okay to apologize and say, I am sorry. And if we don't know, it's okay to say, I don't know, but I will find out. They talk a lot about team, not only the immediate team, they have a small team of people who are with them in that crisis to help them navigate and make decisions, but they consult also with experts outside the team. They work also with the community, whether it is government officials, whether it is a community at large, and also with the constituency, have a large circle of people they are listening to so that they can know what is happening and how to adjust their strategies and their decisions to the situation. We are very pleased to hear also about God's calling, being open to God's calling, and sometimes learn to retreat in a time of silence, quiet time. Try to hear, God, help me. I don't know what to do. But the spirituality of the leader is very important so that you can maintain your integrity. It's not about making political gain. What am I going to do to advance myself or my own people or my own agenda, but what is right? Not only what is according to policy, but what is right. And when we do what is right, there is always a price to pay, because not everybody will be happy when you do what is right. Some people will criticize you. Some people will challenge you. But if you know in your heart before God you are doing the right thing, then you have peace in your heart and you know you can move forward because you have done the best in that situation. Remember, we are not in heaven yet. There is no perfect situations. There is no perfect solutions. There are always some downside to whatever you do. But if we remember that we trust God, we trust in his principle, we do what is right, what is fair, then we are going to be at peace. Whether it is at night when we go to bed or 10 years or 15 years down the road, when we look back, we are going to remember that we have made a courageous decision not to tell people lie, to say everything is okay when things are not okay. And I even wrote the notes, the words that Dr. Simon mentioned, telling them the truth, but remaining positive regardless. In other words, yes, there is a problem. Yes, there is a challenge. Yes, it is not easy, but together we can make it. Tomorrow will be a better day. So those are what I put down on my notes here. And I know if any one of my colleagues want to add a word or two to that, but I think that those things that we have learned over the last 6 weeks from leaders in the front line, from various backgrounds, from various fields, whether it is pastoral ministry, K-12 education, higher education, church ministry, or community leaders, business leaders, there are some underlying principles that we can learn and apply, and that will help us to be better and stronger leaders. All right. So this being said,
For those who
Dr.
want,
Kovic want to say something?
yeah, for those who want a little more of what Ella Simmons was talking about, some of the racial issues of the Seventh-day Adventist Church, Andrews University Press produced this book, by Calvin Rock called Protest and Progress. I'm on the last 2 chapters. Black Seventh-day Adventist Leadership and the Push for Parity. It's a very well-written book. Calvin Rock used to also be the vice president of the General Conference, as well as chairman of the board at Loma Linda for many years. So I highly recommend this. It kind of gives you more insight into what she was talking about, the regional conference and the things related to that within the Seventh-day Adventist Church.
Thank you very much. Very informative, Dr. Covey. I would like to conclude tonight by saying a few words about one of the programs that we haven't said much about. We talk about educational leadership. We talk about leadership in Brazil, in New Gold, and so on in Europe. But I would like to say a few words about the higher education administration program that we offer on this campus. The higher education administration program prepares leaders to serve on our campuses, whether it is public universities or private universities, Christian universities all over the world. People who want to be deans, chairs, presidents, vice presidents, people who are serving on boards, on board of trustees, and so on. And in this, we have many classes that we offer that are part of our program. We have, for example, administration of student services, how to better serve students while they are on campus so that they can grow and develop and support them in what they do. We have principle of academic services, that's another class that we offer. We have another class is college student development theories. What happened to a student when that student come on campus at 18 years old and they leave at 22 or 23 or 24? How do they grow and develop and learn to find their identity and their calling? We have also higher education law. In that class, it's very interesting when we look at how the law affects higher education, how leaders should make sure they have a lawyer on campus or ready to be consulted, because it is very tricky. It's a very litigious society. People are suing people from everywhere. Employees are suing, parents are suing, students are suing, people from the community are suing. What can you do to protect yourself and protect the institution that we are serving? And in that class, we look at a lot of cases affecting Adventist universities in the last 20 years. For example, do you know that Loma Linda has been sued because they fired an employee who was pregnant out of wedlock, and the university was sued? In other cases, we have a student who sued last year at university for not following due process. Okay, you made a decision, but you didn't follow what is written in your own handbook by giving me a chance to defend myself and so on. So all those lawsuits, we review them in the class so that the students can know, oh, this is what happened then. Let me make sure when I become a dean, when I become a chair, when I become a vice president, when I become a president, those things will not happen under my watch. Do you know that Columbia Union College, now Washington Adventist University, actually sued the state of Maryland, because Maryland deprived them some funds that they were giving to all universities, and they say that because you're pervasively religious and because of separation of church and state, we cannot give you that money. At the same time, they gave some of that money to Catholic universities and so on, and there was a big lawsuit. So all those are real cases that we study in the class, and we see this is what happened, this is why it happened, this is how it was handled, and this is what can be done better in the future. And we have also some lawsuits for discriminations, especially in admission. We have some nursing school and so on. We have many cases. So it is a very fun set of studies. I encourage those who feel that they are called to be administrators in higher education, colleges and universities. We invite them to contact us at leader@andrews.edu. Ask for more information. And for the higher education administration program, we have students who are on campus. We have a wonderful group of participants from all different countries in the world. And when you hear the stories they are telling that happens on their campuses, we learn so much from Arabic Saudis, from Africa, from Asia, and they are sharing their stories. And we have a very broad understanding of what higher education leadership can be around the world. So thank you so much for participating, for being part of this wonderful series of webinars. And we invite you for in 2 weeks, we are going to have that conversation in leadership. Remember that you can contact us by email. We'll be happy to send you the link. I did put it on the screen, and I'm sure that you will be able to join us, invite you. And at this time, we are just going to have a word of prayer as we close. And thank you again so much, participants. Thank you again, guests. Thank you, faculty members, for all your support. We praise the Lord for his blessings and for the success of this program. Let us pray as we close. Father God, we want to give you praise and glory for this series, Leading in Times of Crisis. We have heard several speakers. We thank you for the wisdom, the experience, the expertise that you have given them, and for the willingness for them to give their time and for their knowledge so that we can learn from them and with them. We pray for all our participants from all around the world who have been online, on Facebook, on YouTube, to participate in this program. Bless each one of us and help us to be better, stronger leaders. As we move forward, we can be leaders of integrity who will make a difference in the community and who will be a blessing for our country and our church and our families. Thank you, God. Praise be to your name, now and forevermore. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.